Hello, I'm so glad you decided to join me today. Before I introduce you to our guest, I just wanted to say a very big thanks to everyone who's sent me emails and left comments and messages. It appears you're enjoying my interviews, and that makes me really happy. Now on with it. I tracked down our feature artist today a little while ago and was really chuffed when he agreed to have a chat. He was born and raised in Texas, but as a rock and roller never really hit it big in his homeland. Fans, however, couldn't get enough of him in the UK, as his trouser-busting stage antics helped turn him into a genuine pop star at the height of the British invasion. I know you know his name. You may even be aware that he was a bit of a wild man. Now let's meet PJ Proby.
Hey there.
Hey, PJ Proby. Are you okay if I take you back a bit and we talk about some of your life?
Sure, go ahead.
I know you were born as James Marcus Smith. You were the great-grandson of an Old West outlaw.
John Wesley Hardin.
How did that affect you growing up?
Well, it only affected me in playing cowboys and Indians. I was always John Wesley.
We did a lot of playing cowboys and Indians when we were young, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, I lived it.
I bet you did. After your parents divorced, you were actually sent off to military academy. How did that go for you?
Well, it went pretty bad. Put me in a full uniform immediately, like I was in the Army. We had the same exact clothes as the soldiers in the World War II. And Daddy saw me crying. He said, "Jimmy, stop that. You're 10 years old now. You're a grown man." I cried for about 3 weeks. I had my ass beat for not doing things right. So I started learning how to become an officer right there so I wouldn't get whipped anymore. So I went from a private to a corporal to a sergeant to a captain.
It was sometime after you left school that you decided that you wanted to have a career in the movies.
I decided that when I was like 5 and 6 years old when I saw my first movies. I was completely hooked when I saw Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, everything that had to do with movies I wanted to be in.
So acting was there from the beginning.
Totally.
What took you then to California?
Well, when I was a teenager, I knew a boy named Tommy Sands, and he was called Little Tommy Sands because he was only 12 years old when he made it. He was a singer. He had hit records in the country field, and he was going with my stepsister, Betty Moores. He got me on a television show, Cracker Barrel Corner. Biff Colley came to us one day and said, "Boys, I want to take you out to meet a new boy this Saturday at the hitching post where you're singing, and he'll be singing out there with you." He's new on the scene. His name's Elvis Presley. And so we went out there Saturday night and we met this guy, long sideburns, speckled pink and black jacket on with a speckled pink and black pants and alligator shoes with chartreuse shoelaces. We were introduced and everything. Now Elvis said, "Pleased to meet you, boys. Pleased to meet you." He looked over at my sister Betty and he just completely flipped out. And he got on stage that night and sang every song to Betty. The next morning, his Cadillac was in our driveway, and Mama had fixed him a chicken dinner and everything. And he sat back and he ate his dinner. At the end of the meal, he said, "Mrs. Moores, that's one of the best chicken dinners I've ever had. So would you mind if Betty and I got up and went in the living room and listened to some music?" Mother said, "No, Elvis, do anything you want." He said, "Thank you very much." And Mother had set the whole table with Irish linen tablecloths, her best, and her best Irish linen napkins. And he picked up the tablecloth and wiped his mouth with the tablecloth. He said, "Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much." And my mother almost fainted. And I said, "Mama, he was born poor. He's a country boy. And country boys even wipe their mouth on their sleeves, much less the tablecloth." Said that's the only thing Elvis knew when he was growing up. That is what led me to Hollywood. Tommy Sands was waiting for me once I got there. I went to call him to ask him what my next step was when we got to Hollywood and got to a gas station. I called Tommy and he said, "There's not too much I can do for you right now, Jimmy, because I'm doing a picture with Nat Funicello and Pat Boone, and I haven't got very much time." He said, "Why don't you go up to Lillian Goodman, the vocal coach, and if you can get her to teach you, you'll run into all kind of people that will help you." And so I went up there. I sang for Lillian and she accepted me. My daddy said, "How much is it going to cost me?" He said, "It'll cost you quite a bit." So Daddy put me with Lillian for a year. Within 2 weeks, Lillian had introduced me to Ray Gilbert, who wrote Zoot Suit with a replete and Zippity Doodah. He became my manager. He took me to Gaby Lutz, Heller and Loeb, who had all the biggest names in show business, and I sang for them. See, there were no cassette players in those days. You had to sing live. And I sang for them at the front of their desk, and they said, "We'd like to sign you up. How old are you?" I said, 17. And they said, "Jimmy, how much do you want to sign with us?" I'd never heard of "how much do you want?" And I said, "How much do I want?" And Daddy said, "Jimmy, go ahead and sit out in the foyer. I'll do this deal for you." So I was all signed, sealed, delivered in Hollywood at that time.
So, PJ, was it a combination of your really good looks and a good singing voice that they all wanted you and signed you on the spot?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I thought that I was so damn good looking in those days that I just put on a beautiful sports coat and a nice shirt and walked down Hollywood Boulevard thinking I was already a movie star. And even when the movie stars pass, I just say, "Hello, like, I'm one of you. Hi, I'm one of you." It never even passed my mind that I hadn't done anything yet.
I love it. The power of positive thinking.
Yes,
Right. Well, you started working, didn't you? And you were given the stage name of Jet Powers at the time.
yeah. Well, before we left Gaby Lutz, Heller and Loeb, they said we can't use the name Jimmy Smith or James Smith. So there's already a John Smith who's already an established movie star, and you'll have to get another name. And of course, Ray Gilbert jumped in and said, "Why don't you call him Jiminy Cricket?" And I said, "My God, man, no, don't tell me something from Song of the South or one of those pictures. Don't do that to me." I said, I've got a name. So I said, Jet and Tyrone Power, Jet Powers. And they said, "That's fine, you're Jet Powers."
But that didn't last very long, did it?
Well, it lasted up until 1961 or two when I'd met Sharon Shealy. I'd met everybody in Hollywood by then. The Everlys, Ricky Nelson, who Sharon wrote "Poor Little Fool" for. Through Sharon Shealy, I'd met everybody. And she was going with a singer called Eddie Cochran. And Eddie and I became best friends. And then she had a girl living with her called Dottie Harmony, who was going with Elvis. And Elvis got drafted. Dottie took him to the draft board and had her picture taken with him there and everything, and spent that Christmas with him. And then he was drafted and living at Sharon Shealy's house. And one day I was laying in bed, and this friend of mine, Jimmy Blumberg, came over and said, "Put some clothes on. I'm going to take you over to a friend of mine, Sharon Shealy's house." I said, "Now, why in hell would I want to go over there?" And he said, "There's a girl there that you have always been wanting to meet." I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Dottie Harmony." I said, "What?" And he said, "Put a shirt on. Come on, I'll take you over there." So we went over, introduced to Sharon and Mary Jo, her sister. And about 30, 45 minutes passed, and I turned to Blumberg and I said, "You lying sucker." I said, "They know Dottie Harmony here." And Sharon heard me, and she said,
"Oh, yeah? Well, then who's that at the top of the stairs?"
and I looked up, and there was this beautiful blonde. It was Harmony. Within a week, I moved in with Dottie at a trailer. We got engaged to be married.
So Dottie had been Elvis's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Elvis had gone out with your sister, and Sharon Shealy was a songwriter at the time, right?
She was 14 when she wrote "Poor Little Fool" for Ricky. And she introduced me to a guy called Baker Knight, who wrote "The Wonder of You." Johnny and Dorsey and Baker Knight were the main songwriters for Ricky Nelson. And so, knowing Sharon, that's how I got in with that whole gang of people. I found I was writing more Sinatra and more Tony Bennett. And I learned from the Burnett brothers and from Baker Knight and Sharon. I noticed they were writing for teenagers and the songs were very teenagey. So I learned how to bring it down from all this heavy stuff to lighter music that was selling. And that's how I got my first hit record, "Ain't Gonna Kiss You," for this girls group. And that was my beginning of writing commercial type music, not the classical type stuff that Sinatra did.
That single was your entree card.
Yeah, that was it.
Was it Sharon that renamed you again?
Oh, yeah. Oh, what happened is I was pretty wild in Hollywood. I was very wild in Hollywood. Dottie and I had broken up, and she had married Bob Colbert of Time Tunnel. She heard about me being so wild and came down and picked me up one day, and I thought, we're back together. I gave her a cat, a black cat, and I got in the car and we were driving off, and I thought we were going back to the trailer in Burbank, and we went past the Capitol building going the other way. And I said, aren't we going to the valley to the trailer? Aren't we back together? And she said, no, 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 no. I'm taking you out to Eddie Cochran's brothers. He's building a recording studio, and I've got you a job helping him build the studio. And I said, oh my God. And so we got there, and I was introduced to Bob Cochran, Eddie's brother. And she said, now, Bobby, you put him to work. Dottie got in the car and left. And so I went to work building the recording studio with him. I lasted about a month, and I got in a fight with his boss, and he pulled us apart. The boss said, get him off my property. So Bob took me into Hollywood and didn't have any money. No, I had $10. We couldn't find any place that cheap. So we passed on Wilcox Boulevard, a sign saying, McConkey Agency, room for rent. I said, stop there. Let me go in and check this out. So I went in there and met the lady who ran the place. Turned out to be an agent for singers and everything. She took me back to a garage apartment. It's one little bed and a sink, no toilet. I said, this'll do. How much is it? She said, 25 a month. I said, well, I've only got 10. She said, I had my guitar with me. We were walking back to the car, to Bob's car. And she said, do you play that thing you're carrying? I said, my guitar, you mean? She said, yeah. I said, of course I do. I'm a singer. She said, you are? I said, well, I get people work. She said, I'll give you the room for 10 a month. And so I said, Bobby, I got the room. See you later. Maybe a month, and nothing was happening for me. So I decided to just go on back to Texas and join the army. So I was walking down the street, and I looked over on my left, and on a building there was a sign that said, songs wanted, $100 a song. And I just turned, there was a line of boys there, and I got in line because I had just written about 3 or 4 songs for Dottie. And I went in and I sung my 3 songs, and I didn't think I'd impressed him at all. Shut my guitar case, and I was about to go out the door. He said, don't you want your money? I said, what? He said, you're $300. I'm taking all 3 songs. Got to the door and went, whoa, man, yeah. Had $300. I came back to the little room I just rented, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I went out and I bought myself a suit to go to all interviews with, brand new pair of shoes so I looked proper, enough canned food to last me a year.
You're still Jet Powers at this time, aren't you?
Yeah.
You haven't been renamed yet.
No, I went out on the driveway with a beer and lay down next to a puddle of oil, pretended it was a beach, and lay back in the sun to get a tan, laying next to the oil strip. And all of a sudden I heard beep, beep, beep. I looked up, and there was Sharon Shealy's Cadillac down at the bottom of the driveway with Jackie DeShannon in it. And I said, well, hi, what are y'all doing here? She said, come get in the car. I'm going to take you and get you a recording contract so you have an income. I said, put some clothes on. I said, Sharon, I just went down and sold my songs to a man down the street. I gave me $300. Said, what was his name? And I told Sharon. She said, I know him. Get some clothes on. I'm going to get your money back. So I went and got dressed, jumped in the car, and she took me straight to Liberty Records to meet Dick Glasser. And I sang the same 3 songs, and he signed me. And he said, I'd like to sign you not only to Metric Music as one of our in-house writers, but you're a good singer. I'd like to sign you as a singer to Liberty Records too. And he said, the only problem is you're very well known in Hollywood, Jet. You're very well known mainly to all the police. Every Saturday you're in jail for drunken disorderly. I said, yeah. He said, well, we'll have to change your name. And Sharon Sheedy bumped in.
Change it to PJ Proby.
And PJ Proby had been her boyfriend before she met Eddie Cochran. And so he lives somewhere in San Diego, and I've never met him. And that was the beginning of my singing career.
You never heard a word from the real PJ Proby in San Diego.
Never, never a hint. The real thing has never gotten in touch with me.
I wonder if he's still around.
Well, yes, I wonder too.
Right. So, PJ, you started writing songs and recording demos for people like Elvis, for Bobby V, and for Johnny Burnett at the time. How did that come about?
Well, the one I wrote for Elvis with Dottie Harmony, I had it taken up to Elvis. Elvis was in the shower and he yelled from the shower, "Who is that? I want to do that song. Who is that?" And he went in to get dressed. And while he was getting dressed, Joe Esposito, who Elvis brought back from the army, came out and said, "I know who that is singing. That's PJ Proby singing. You tell Proby I want 60% or I won't let Elvis do it." Well, the next day, I got a phone call from Dottie saying Ricky Nelson had done it. Yeah, it's in my dreams.
Okay, so you're now on the straight and narrow, you're good looking, you're singing, you're writing for a whole lot of artists. Things are looking up for you, right?
Oh, yeah. I went to work to do all of Elvis's movies, singing the soundtrack, singing the demonstration records that were taken up to Elvis for him to learn to do for the movies. The Johnny Burnett thing is one I wrote called Clown Shoes. They gave it to Johnny, and Johnny did it. And it wasn't such a big hit in America, but it was a big hit over here in England. I got 4, 5, or 6 artists who did my records and did them very, very well. And I still get money off of it. When I get the most money off of, I wrote Ain't Gonna Kiss You, which Liberty Records sued me for, but they also sent it to the Searchers over here in England, and the Searchers put it out and had a big hit with it. Most money I get to this day is off that record.
Why did you decide to leave Hollywood and head for the UK?
What happened was when Sharon got back, she was in a neck cast and we were nursing her because she almost got killed with Eddie Cochran. See, she was with Eddie over here when they had the car crash and Eddie was killed. And Sharon was almost killed. We were taking care of her. So I thought, well, Dottie's married, so I'm going to be married. So I married Mary Ann. My wife and I had no more money. The car was repossessed. All the lights were turned off, electricity. And Mary and I were sitting there and one night in the middle of the floor eating tacos. That's all we could afford to candlelight. And there was a knock at the door. And I said, "Honey," grabbed my pistol, said, "Go to the door and see who that is." So she went to the door and opened the door, and there was Sharon Shealy and Jackie DeShannon. I said, "Well, ladies," I let go of the gun, "what brings you to this neck of the woods?" They said,
Got somebody to meet you.
and he walked over to me and said, "Hi, dear boy. Be at CBS tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And with that, he vanished. And I said, "What the hell was all that about, Sharon?" He said, "Jack is doing a new television thing called Young America Swings the World, and you're hired to be in it." And that's how I met Jack Good.
So he saw not only the potential for you as a singer, but also as an actor.
Yes. And then the Beatles came out, and Jack came over and said, Jim, I have to go back to England for a while." Said, "I've just got a letter from the Beatles manager, and he wants me to come over and direct their first television special." He said, "What I'm going to do, dear boy, while I'm gone, I'm going to take your records, and I'm going to play them for the boys and for Brian Epstein, their manager, and see if I can't get you on the program." And I said, "Sure, Jack," because at that time I didn't rate the Beatles. I didn't think that they were any good because I put them upside the Four Freshmen and the Four Seasons and people with these great harmonies, and the Beatles just weren't that good. And I was waiting for Jack to get back, and all of a sudden the telephone rings and it said, "Is PJ Proby there?" I said, "Who's calling?" He said, "This is Vivian Moynihan from Rediffusion in England. Would you like to come over? I'm speaking on behalf of Brian Epstein and the Beatles and Mr. Jack Good. Would you like to come over and do their show?" I said, "I would love to." She said, "I thought that's what you'd say. Your ticket has already been booked. Good day." That was it.
You appear on the very first Beatles television special. What was that like for you?
I still didn't rate it as anything real big. 'Cause I met the Beatles. They were nice and everything, but I still didn't rate them because they only had one song out, I Want to Hold Your Hand. The thing is, I didn't have any clothes to wear because my wife had just left me and given all my clothes to her lover. So I only had a pair of ripped jeans, which are very much in vogue today, and but not in those days. So I called Nan Morris, who worked for Henry Wilson, who I used to work for as Rock Hudson's bodyguard. And Nan picked up a girl I was dating, Tuesday Weld, at the time. And they
Ah.
came to pick me up the next morning, took me out to Warner Brothers because I still had a contract. And I went into clothing and I stole a shirt that Paul Newman wore for Left Handed Gun out of the wardrobe. And I stole a pair of boots that Russ Tamblyn wore in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And as I was passing the rack, I saw a really beautiful jacket, and I took that too. Next day, I dressed and I put my jeans on and I Russ Tamblyn boots and my Paul Newman shirt. And I got to the airport. I haven't got any money to buy drinks on the airplane. So when it came time for me to walk down the steps, there was Jack Good with a beautiful Rolls Royce and all the press at the foot of the stairs. And he said, "Now, welcome to England." And with that, somebody in the press said, "PJ, do something British." And I couldn't think of anything except Winston Churchill's sign, the V sign. Gave the V sign. Jack screamed out, "No, no, Jim, no, turn it around, and I'll tell you what you've done in a moment." I turned it around and I said, "What are you yelling at, Jack? I gave the V sign." And he said, "No, no, Jim, over here. The sign you gave is called a Harvey Smith. It means up yours. So
Right.
when you said do something for England, you said up yours, England."
So, PJ, you're not a teen idol there yet, but your music is starting to take off. Jack Good had introduced your music to the UK, and you had several UK top 10 hits.
Well, I did after I'd done the Beatles special. I met this girl who was on the same show called Millie, a little colored girl, and I was playing guitar, singing some songs that were standard classics that I had turned into rock and roll Beatles things. And one was the old Dick Haymes song, "Hold Me," which is "Hold me, honey, won't you hold me?" And I turned it,
Hold me, dun, 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 dun. Honey, won't you hold me? Yeah.
and Millie said, "That's great. Could you teach it to me? Could you teach me the guitar?" And I said, "Sure, honey, I can teach you anything you want." And Jack walked up and said, "Dear boy, that's marvelous. Let's go in and cut it." So the next day we were at the studio and I met Big Jim Sullivan. Jimmy Page was only 14. He played rhythm guitar. And so we did Hold Me. Jack had brought a lady in who worked the Evening Standards. And she said, "That was great, PJ." She said, "It's going to be a hit." And I said, "No, it'll never be a hit." She said, "I'll bet it is." And so I had a bet with the Beatles it wouldn't be a hit. And I had a bet with Maureen Cleave it wouldn't be a hit. And I left the next day and went back to California. The phone rang. It was another guy who wanted to be my manager. And he said, "Your record is at number 3 in the charts. It's Hold Me with a red bullet, meaning it's climbing." The only people in front of me were the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
You were the toast of the town. You were this instant smash hit and a teen idol. I've seen the footage of you performing Hold Me and various other songs. The girls are just going absolutely crazy,
Yeah, they
screaming
did.
their heads off. What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Oh, it was fantastic. You see, all the other boys in this country, I noticed they never moved. The boys stood in one place and shook their hair. I was raised where the colored people all moved all over the stage and boogied everywhere. So that's one thing I was doing. The next thing was I wasn't a 5-piece group man like James Brown and the Flames and all the colored boys. They had 6 and 18-piece orchestras.
Hmm.
So I went to Wagner Regis and I brought back a 8, 9, 10-piece orchestra. And I trained them to sound just like James Brown and the Flames. England had never seen anything like that. And this guy that had called me and told me that my record was number 3 in the charts, I had signed with him, and he had got me a show opening at the Albert Hall. My first performance in England was at the Albert Hall, and it was the Adam Faith show. I rehearsed and rehearsed, my boys, to sound big, big orchestra, James Brown and the Flames. I had a couple of songs, James Brown songs I was doing. So I'd gone out and I'd bought all this gear that I was going to use. I hadn't done the velvets, but I got the flared pants and the shirt like the Paul Newman shirt I had worn over here, all done in satin, and buckled shoes like they wore in early England. So what I was doing is I was dressing as a peasant, but in silks as a peasant. And got to the dressing room that night at the Albert Hall. Everything arrived, the buckled shoes, pants, no shirt. The shirt did not arrive. And I had nothing to go on the stage with. So I just had a white t-shirt. And I had this lady with me. She said, PJ, let me do something. I'm going to slit your sleeves at the seams all over. And when you flex your muscles on stage and everything, they're going to split and the crowds are going to go wild. And that's the only stunt I ever pulled. Pants split, the thing I'm famous for, was never, ever intended. Never. She did that shirt that day. I went on that night and I told the audience, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to come on to you tonight with no clothes on. I said, my clothes didn't arrive. And the audience was already screaming before I even went on stage. They thought I was coming out naked. So I went on stage with the pants, the shoes, but only a t-shirt on. Nobody had ever gone on stage in this country in a t-shirt. The Who finally came on in t-shirts. Everybody wore t-shirts after me. But I went on and I started singing. I got through one number and it started splitting at the seams. Every place she had done that week in the t-shirt. And they rushed the stage. The Albert Hall never had the stage rushed. They rushed the stage, knocked over all the policemen, and the policemen drugged me off the stage and to put me in a corrugated iron toilet. And as we were going off the stage, my hair wasn't long enough for a ponytail, so I had a false one, and it was pinned with bobby pins almost into my scalp, and it was jerked off my head, and the door to the corrugated iron toilet came open, and a policeman's arm came in with my ponytail in his hands with blood dripping from it. Said, I think this belongs to you, PJ, and handed him my ponytail. And the next days it was headlines. I'd blown Adam Faith right off the top of the bill. Evie Taylor, his manager, never spoke to me again for 2 years.
Adam
But that,
Faith, of course, was Budgie, wasn't he?
yeah, yeah, and he was a very dear friend of mine. He was a great guy. That was the only time thing that ever happened that was intended to happen. Everything else you want to talk about split hands was a total accident because my tailors made my pants, the velvets that I'd done instead of the satins, so tight that when I do knee side slides, I told you I don't stand in one place like the English boys and just shake my hair. I did knee slides and somersaults and flips all over the stage. And of course, my pants split at the knees. That's when that happened. But the show was me and Cilla Black. And before it even happened, Tom Jones had come on the scene with It's Not Unusual. He hadn't got a following yet. And Gordon Mills, his manager, went straight to Joe Collins, Joan Collins' father, who was financing the tour of me and Cilla. Said, I want to buy Tom onto the in PJ Proby's place. And the Delphonts, who really run all of showbiz over here, said, no, you can't do that. PJ's already an established singer here, and Tom's just starting out. You can't do that. We can't just fire PJ for no reason. And that Mary Whitehouse said, oh, yes, you can. You can take that money because he's an American and he's going to do something to get in my bad books. They all do. He'll do something that I can get him on. and they'll put Tom on his place. You can accept the money because Tom will be taking PJ's place. And I never knew this. Tom and I had the same minder, and he told me this story years later. And so, pants split or no pants split, I would have been thrown off that tour and Tom would have been put on. Just the pants split was something Mary put out to get the audience against me, saying, look how rude he is and how terrible he is on stage showing flesh.
It became a huge scandal in the British press, didn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I told him, I said, what do you mean? My knees is all that showed. And anyway, you go out and see footballers showing their knees every weekend here. And I said, what is this all about? I didn't have a clue that I had been bought off. And she made such a big thing that I was such a terrible person. I was moving like all colored people always moved in America. But of course, in America, they never made a big deal about anything a colored man did because they were banned from white TV shows anyway. I was going from what I saw live when I went to colored shows.
If we can just fast forward a few years,
Yeah.
I'm really interested to hear about your collaboration with Van Morrison.
Well, I'd known Van for a long, long time. We go back so far. I started to learn to play English football working out with Chelsea. They were playing a show business team against somebody else, and I was on the show business team. Van was on this. That's how I met him. We were practicing, and every time I kicked the ball, it went into the grandstands. I couldn't keep the ball in play on the ground. So all of a sudden, this guy came over to me and said, hi, my name's Van Morrison. Said, PJ, I'll give you a case of beer just to sit this game out and not play because you can't play soccer. I said, you're right. And then we worked on and off together. And one day, my sister came up to me when I was helping her out at the ranch in Texas. And she said, have you heard this record by Van Morrison? She was a really big fan of Van. And she said, he's singing about you. I said, no, I haven't heard it. So she put it on and it was Van Morrison's Whatever Happened to PJ Proby. I went immediately back to England. I wrote a song called PJ Proby Calling Van Morrison. Van got hold of touch me and wanted me to come in and sing Whatever Happened to PJ Proby all over again with him. And I said, Van, I can't go singing about myself. Wait a minute, Van. Yes, I can. I'm old enough. I'm so old now. I can do anything that wouldn't hurt my career or anything else. I can do anything. You got a deal. So I went in recording, and Van recorded me singing with him and almost copying the way he sings. And then he put me on at the Albert Hall with him. We did a show together. Then he started using me as a demo singer for his records. He's still doing that to this day.
What an amazing career you've had. I mean, just to fill in the blanks, in the 80s, you recorded covers of various songs, including Tainted Love by Gloria Jones, Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division, Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols. You did get to play Cassio in Othello. In the early 90s, you did the musical Good Rockin' Tonight, and you played Roy Orbison in Only the Lonely. You've had an astounding career. You did a new production of Elvis the Musical, as I mentioned before, with Mark Arman.
Yeah.
And PJ, what was it like in 1997 when you toured with The Who and you were the godfather in the road production of Quadrophenia?
Oh, that was incredible. I couldn't believe it. I had known The Who since 64 when they were my supporting act.
PJ Proby, what an absolute treat to chat with you. Congratulations on the most incredible career and the wildest life lived. I think you're pretty awesome.
You too, darling. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.